And before I start introducing the panel, I just want to recognize Lisa, who was a little bit ago sitting in a meeting and going, you know, maybe we should have a snow summit. And that idea, she took that ball and ran with it. And this is amazing. This is a great turnout and an amazing opportunity for us to network and find out about each other. And also just a great thank you from our beautiful city to recognize what we do each year for our city. So I'm just going to quickly introduce our panel, starting with Heidi at the end, who has lived in St. Paul for almost a decade. She has been alley captain for her neighbors on Sumner and prior in Highland Park for 6 years. She loves getting notified when her neighbors submit payment via Venmo or PayPal. And then we have Michael, who is a resident of the Hamlin Midway area and snow removal enthusiast, working to create deeper connections with neighbors. And then we have Kathy, who is passionate about the potential for connecting alley plow coordinators to St. Paul's district councils. Yeah, my antenna went up for that too, to create a network of block ambassadors throughout our city. Awesome. And then we have Deb, who is married to our St. Paul fleet manager, Shane. Shane, wave. There he is. Okay. Together, they have led the alley plow charge for their block for the past 10 years in the McAllister Groveland neighborhood. And I am Michelle. I was born and raised and educated in St. Paul and returned to live in St. Paul in 2003. I am a retired St. Paul Public Schools elementary teacher. I know, I had to put that in. I have served my neighbors as alley captain for about 18 years, and our block is on the 50-yard line of Johnson High School's athletic field. Go Govies. And so I think I'm going to begin by throwing out our first question for our alley captains. What is your biggest challenge as an alley snowplow captain? What steps are you taking to try to change or address the challenges that you face? So yeah, go.
Good morning. Thank you for having us. Thank you for having me this morning. I have the good fortune of having inherited a very mature alley plow program from my predecessor. And so I recognize that my challenges are probably a little different from some of you. However, in spite of that, it is still a challenge every year to get everybody on the block to contribute. Part of that is, some of it's financial hardship, of course, but a lot of it is really just due to the attrition on the block. So rental people coming and going, people passing their home on to other folks. And so when that happens, really the big benefit to me has been aggregating a list of the neighbors and email addresses and contact information for people and getting as much done as I can in the beginning with just email. Right, sending that note out via email and having electronic payments, and then you can just really focus on the folks that haven't responded, haven't done anything, and really go literally door to door to try and get that information. It's a great opportunity to meet some new people and meet some new neighbors, but that's how I would answer that question.
Well, I guess my biggest challenge is we have a variety. Well, very good. I really appreciate the diversity in our alley. I'm Summit and Grand, and we have rental housing, a variety of people who don't have access to the alley, all these things. So those are my challenges. My gifts is I get to know all my neighbors, and that's really been helpful. And they also think that I'm responsible for all the St. Thomas acting out, or and so they call me. But calling me is good, because when we had our speedway was blown up, I was in contact with the district council, St. Thomas, telling my neighbors what to, not what to do, but making suggestions about things. So it really brings the neighborhood together. And so this would be that whole idea of a block ambassador, and then you've got a bigger, once you're hooked to the district councils, I think there's a lot of opportunities for them to help us find alley captains, plowers, or things like that. So I've been very blessed with the same plower who lives up the alley. So when he goes, I think I'm gonna have to go. But I'm just, oops, maybe I'm not turned it off. Oh, okay. I'm so impressed, though, and every person that here, we live in St. Paul. We're not weenies. We just step up. And so that's a beautiful thing. And I think that we're blessed by our city and all the wonderful people here today that care. So thank you.
Hey, everybody. Good morning. I don't know about you, but one of my biggest challenges as an alley captain was not knowing what I was doing. Right, like starting just like, I don't know, because I inherited this as well. And the first challenge was just beginning that process of finding a contractor and how to do that, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a moment. And then the second challenge for myself was feeling motivated in September when the bill comes and they're like, hey, you owe this amount. And the process of going to your neighbors when it's still 90 degrees outside and say, pay me for snow money, it's weird for them. And on top of just the rising cost of everything, inflation and that kind of thing, it's difficult for some people to pay. And on top of that, going back around to those same neighbors and asking them again to pay this bill, it can be uncomfortable. So just my biggest challenge is just like staying motivated to ask for money, basically. But ultimately, it's for the good of our entire block.
Good morning. I will echo what many of you said, and I will also add a challenge that I have is alley maintenance. So we are fortunate in my neighborhood to have a really wide alley, which means that things encroach into the alley, the bushes, the branches, the leaves, the piles that people set in their alley, the free furniture for someone to take. All of that stuff just keeps making our alley more narrow. And so the challenge that we had last year is that we obviously had a record snowfall. The alley gets more narrow with all of that. And then the trucks don't come anywhere near a branch. They don't want to scratch their truck, just like we don't want to scratch our cars. And so I think that's a challenge that I'm working to address in my alley. Having inherited a mature program as well, where people are happy to participate, is how do we help people clean the alley and keep it as open as possible so that the trucks can get through and plow as much snow out of the way as they can.
Yes, snow is a social event. I got that from Sean this morning, and I hadn't thought of it. That's all our shared space. It's all our alley. And as the question and the comment about community trust brings up our next question, because who are you and why do you want my money? And how do you engage and build community trust with your neighbors to create urgency, cooperation, and buy-in from all the stakeholders to participate in supporting alley plowing efforts? And I'm going to just quickly add my 2 cents worth here that a couple summers ago, I started a program that I call Back Alley Buddies. And it's just, I have coffee on our alley in an open space that I share with my neighbor. And we have coffee and donuts and a time for people to get to know each other. It's, it's my way of answering our need to be more civil, to know each other and to see each other, and to be inclusive in our neighborhoods. Do you have anything?
That's great. I think Kathy said something to the effect of how she's contacted for things outside of the alley plowing now because everybody knows who she is. I do think having those email threads with the group do lend themselves to other types of communication besides just the alley plow. And it's pretty nice to see, you know, we have an elderly neighbor who has been in and out of care, and the next door neighbor to him will give updates to the group about what's going on with Bud. Everybody's always happy to hear it and know how they can support. And so I think some of that reinforcement that comes through starts to build relationships that you wouldn't have otherwise. And granted, email is not always the best form of communication, but it does sort of let you know what's going on so that when you see people out and about, it's easy to step into a conversation and just build a little bit more of that community.
I guess for me, it made me very popular at a gathering, you know, because actually they're grateful to me. And so I get in a lot of trouble out and about. So I appreciate their appreciation and just understand everyone's story. Oftentimes they don't know stories, and I get to know their stories, and that's a blessing. I just love what you do. That's great. So I appreciate those relationships, and it is social.
For me, it just kind of starts with a wave, a hello, you know, talking to people in the alley as you see them. It doesn't need to be any big thing for myself. It sounds like a lot of work getting coffee and donuts together, but, you know, just, hi, how are you? That kind of thing.
I think the other piece about building trust is reminding people why we're doing what we're doing, why we're asking them to pay for alley plowing. One, it doesn't get done if we don't have a plower, right? So not everyone has the luxury of a truck or SUV that they can get out. So getting stuck in your alley is real. Also, garbage recycling, you know, for those of us that have alleys, that's where our garbage and recycling bins go. And so if those aren't picked up, you know, that impacts us. Many of us saw that last year when our recycling didn't get picked up. So that's another reason. Utilities. Again, the utility companies come through. We've all seen, you know, the Comcast, Xfinity, you know, I'm sure there's others that come through, right? That are doing work on the electrical, on poles, that type of thing. If your alley's not plowed, they can't get through as well. So I think also reminding people about why we're doing this and why it's important for all of us to contribute and participate makes the big difference too in getting that participation.
And we were talking earlier, Lisa was talking about how we can find out rental information for rental properties to make a contact with landlords and property owners. And one of the things that I do is that if you are a private business on a block, I think, and I would urge people to check with their tax preparers, but I think those costs for reasonable maintenance, which would include snow removal, are tax. You can put that against your tax bill or tax deduction. Thank you. So do we have anything else to add about rental properties, or because we could move on to our next question? Yes. Yes.
I think I would absolutely use the Ramsey County property tax lookup. It's a great way to see who owns the property. And so their address is listed. If you dig into that property record, the owner's address is listed. You can mail them a letter. And so I've often found that I get better response from the landlord than the tenant. The tenant, you know, there can be turnover. They can move year to year. But if you're reaching out and mailing the letter to the property owner, whether they live in state or not, and giving them that same pitch. And then also giving a letter to the house or the building that's on your alley. So yeah. I treat the landlords, the businesses on my alley no different than anyone else, that they still, again, have that responsibility and to ask them to participate. But using that Ramsey County lookup is a game changer. Also, when your neighbors move, you can now know who bought that house and address them by their first names, reach out to them in a personal way. I think that makes a big difference too.
I'm a landlord too, and so I will just tell you the tenants are not responsible for the alley plowing. So go right to the landlord. Yep.
Okay. And now one of the more meatier questions that I think people is uppermost in a lot of people's mind is how do you handle any total overages from what you collected or shortages of payment, which is probably the more important question. How do you handle the shortages of payment by your neighbors for the plowing contract?
Well, to start with, every year we build in a buffer from whatever the total contract fee is. We don't divide equally across the number of homes on the block. We divide by something less than that, with the expectation that there might be a couple spots on the block that we can't collect from, or it just becomes too troublesome to try and collect. What I'll tell you is there's many people on the block who can't get their wallet out fast enough. As soon as we come around, they're appreciative of the effort and thankful. I even have folks who might throw in a couple extra bucks every year just because they know that not everybody pays. But it's worked out effectively in the past. And if there is an overage, we just put that against the contract for the following year. It ends up being, I'll tell you, $1 or $2 here and there is the variability that we've seen in the last few years, house to house, between the inflation on the contract itself and just the participation. But I'd be happy to share with anyone. I know you distributed a bunch of materials that this group put together, but Excel spreadsheets are the best thing ever when it comes to managing this. So
I do the same thing. Perfect.
The contracts, so I've been doing this for 3 years, and again, I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm learning very much as I go, like fully humble here. And the process has been enlightening, I'd say, because there are some properties that don't pay. I would love if there were overages. It's funny that you started with overages. What do you do with all this extra money? Oh, that's nice of you to say. There's not a lot of extra money, and for some people, they like. So I hand out paper slips, a letter, and it's a form letter. And some people, they miss the letter, they don't see it, and some people, they'll wind up paying in March. So some of that, how I deal with it is just trying to offer people grace and accept that things fall through the cracks, and we do what we can. But money's tight for all of us,
I would say the spreadsheet is key to the operation because then I know who hasn't paid the previous year, who's I've let slide. Sometimes I'm short, like through attrition, then I can remind them. So a spreadsheet is my go-to thing.
Okay, and I'm sure there are someone.
I
Oh,
was just
I'm
going to
sorry.
add one quick thing. I haven't gone down this path, but I would consider it, is if I did run into a situation where there was a big shortfall for the year, I'd go back to the well with my neighbors who are contributing. I think most of them would be willing to pony up a couple extra dollars to cover the difference rather than having that land on any one person. So just something to think about. If it gets to be December, January, and you're missing $50, I think most people would be more than happy to share in that expense with you.
Yes, I was going to say, how about if we take some questions from the audience, and if somebody else on the panel. Oh, you got it, Lisa.
I'll run around.
Okay.
Yep. Oh, right up front. Here we go. I'm gonna hold it for you.
How do you pay the plowing companies? Is that the beginning of the season, the end of the season? If it's the beginning, so how soon do they want to be paid? Obviously before the first snow.
Do you want to give them your mic, and then you can answer? I'll run around and you can answer.
Oh. Okay.
So your question was about how we pay the contractors who are plowing our alleys, and it depends on the contractor, but typically you secure your contract in the summer, early fall to make sure that they're set up for the upcoming snow season. And then you work with them to figure out how they want payment. So in my alley, I pay a flat fee I pay everything up front as soon as I get that invoice from the contractor, and then again doing that math to figure out how much have I had left over from last year, what's the cost per household, that type of thing, to figure out then what the neighbors are contributing. So I'm paying up front, and then my neighbors are basically reimbursing me. So our plower will also invoice individual houses. So that's another option that you can look at. Is sometimes it's a flat fee. Some of them will also invoice all of your neighbors directly. The difference is that's way more expensive for each of your neighbors. And so it's a benefit to everyone if you have that ability to pay up front for your neighbors, because it reduces the costs for everyone. The contractor gets paid right away. They get paid in full. They're not having to do all the administrative work to follow up with all the neighbors. That's what we do. And so that can actually be a really big cost benefit. But setting up in summer, early fall is really key.
Okay, for those of us who haven't done this before and are starting today, can everybody say how much you're paying for your service, number one? And I live on a double block. Did anybody have that experience?
Our contract is $550.
It really depends. I got to say, it's really going to depend on the contractor. So use Google, search and call and reach out to as many places as possible, because you're going to get a range. It completely depends on the length of your alley, how wide your alley is. They will come out and assess, and then they will quote you. So regardless of what we all tell you, right, whether it's 500, whether it's 650, whatever that range is, it's going to completely depend on your specific alley. As to, I think, what they're going to charge you. There's no standard.
I'm going to summarize so people can hear. You're also saying that it also depends on the type of alley that you have, whether it's paved, oil, and the surface that you have. Or just gravel. Yes, because we do have all of those types of alleys in St. Paul.
And I would,
right, hills and curves and everything.
and I would like to add that, now I don't know what I'd like to add. I just lost it. Okay. Oh my goodness. I would like to add that alley plowing, I didn't realize, here I am, I'm back again. I didn't realize that I could collect in June and start collecting when the weather was fine. Last winter, when I was running around practically needing ice skates to get across sidewalks and everything else, I decided, you're too old to do this time of year. I used to pay the bill and then collect the money, and now I collect the money. Which means you're depending upon trust. So from your neighbors to trust you that you're going to pay the bill. So you can do it before the bill lands.
Okay, we have another question right here.
First of all, I am the captain for a T, and my guy charges $700 for the T. If I don't get enough money one year, then I'll just up the amount the next year so everybody pays a little bit extra. It's $30 is the max I've ever charged, but I am curious if people wouldn't mind sharing how much each of your houses pays.
So in my alley, we have the folks that have garages, they pay $22 this year. And then the folks that use it just for garbage recycling utilities, so they're not using the alley for parking, but they are using it for the other services, they pay half of that, so they're paying $11. So both the garage people as well as the non-garage people participate.
The folks on our block, we pay $25 across the board, regardless of what you have. Everyone is equal, and that is higher than the total contract divided by all properties to hopefully account for the properties that don't pay.
Mine is just a variety of front, no alley, rental properties. So it's a variety. I wish I could just like knock that off, but I don't remember. I haven't done my billing. I waited till after today thinking, oh, maybe I'll have some really good ideas too. So, so there you go.
Ours is 24 this year, and if you haven't seen it, there's a lot of great material in the back where I didn't remove my contact information and my Venmo, so you can go ahead and send me money if you want. But in the sample letters, there's a lot of detail so that, I think that's helpful, including some contract samples so you can see what some of us pay and what the terms are, if it's helpful.
In my alley, it's also a range. I live in a modest neighborhood over on the St. Paul's East Side. So we have people who, about 50% of our block contributes. And I've done this for 18 years, so it's pretty stable. And some contribute as much as $100 a year, and some contribute $23. And we manage to pay the bill. We get the bill paid. $650 for my area. Yeah, and he's very reliable and good. So, yes, he is, and I have flyers.
We have a question back here.
I had a question about tenants' responsibility. We have a couple Section 8 properties on our alley, and I called the city, and they said it's actually the tenant's responsibility.
For the alley?
Yeah, it's city-owned property. I called the city housing, and they said it's the tenant's responsibility. Is there someone from the city here?
Yeah, I've got DSI Director Weezy to answer that one.
I'm just going to clarify a little bit because we might be talking apples and oranges. City does not own Section 8 housing, so we actually can't even know who is in Section 8 housing. It's a privacy thing. So Section 8 housing is managed by the Public Housing Authority, but the city does own property, and the city is responsible for managing the property that it does own. So if there are PHA-owned Section 8 housing, there's also private provider Section 8 housing, so landlord provided, and as stated earlier, responsibility of the landlord. With that said, if the landlord doesn't pay, obviously the person living there has a vested interest in having a clear alley. So I think you can still make your pitch to the tenant, but I would go for the landlord first. PHA.
Well, then they lied to me. So,
Okay.
and then it's my responsibility to ask someone who's on limited income to pay.
Okay. Oh, okay. I have a question over here. Did you have a question? Wait, hold on 1 second. And then Daryl will be over to you.
I just wanted to add, because I have a multiple detail about, I'm just getting a new contractor for our alley. We're primarily a bunch of HOA condos. That's mainly what we are. Everybody contributes, thank goodness, and we pay by car. And I think we have about 50 cars. And we're getting, we all wanted it hauled away because of last year. So I got a contractor to provide plow plus haul plus apron, just to give me a variety. But we also added in a trigger point. Most plows do it at 2 or 3 inches, but because we have, we're so high up and the snow doesn't melt, our ruts are terrible and cars get stuck. So I'm requesting a 1-inch trigger, which brings the price up. So those are just things to consider. Right now, the contractor is requesting $1,200. We were at $400 last year.
Hold on, Daryl. Is there anything else?
Yeah, so I'm just considering those things when you're looking at different plows.
So again, the triggers, the width, the type of the alley, aprons, and hauling it away. So there are plow contractors who will haul it away. So all things to keep in mind. Again, when talking about prices, again, I'm just people are paying lots of different things, and there's a lot of different variables. I'm just going to encourage people to connect with each other. That might be the quickest and easy way, and then, of course, swapping information. And Daryl?
Yeah, I'm not going to take up a lot of time because I'm not a St. Paul resident. I use St. Paul streets. I know the St. Paul challenges that we have during during the snowstorms, during the snow emergencies. However, I will say that when you're contracting with your plow guy, it varies from apartment to apartment or house to house or alley to alley. And a lot of times, if you're contracting with your contractor, make sure your contractor knows, like in my case, my entrance is only accessible in the back. So that means up a ramp. Luckily, my ramp is covered by a awning. So, but I still have to have them out there by 7 a.m. in the morning because I tell them my wife and I need to get to work by 8. So, and those are and like the other person said, if you have a trigger that says I want you to come instead of 3 inches of snow or 2 inches of snow, I want it to be 1 inch or 1.5 inches because the wheelchair doesn't move if it's more than 1.5 inches. Those are extra. But as a renter, which I'm a renter, my whole family's a renter. I believe in renters all the way. Ownership is underrated, guys. So as a renter, it is not your responsibility in subsidized housing or Section 8 housing, which I currently live in. It is the responsibility of the landlord to do those things. And that having said that, my landlord wasn't very good about doing it the first 2 years I lived there. So what do I do? I contract with some folks on nextdoor.com and I say, hey, this is what I need. This is what my challenges are. And yes, you'll be paid by my landlord. Then I contract with my landlord, and my landlord says, yeah, that's a good rate. We've been using that guy for the last 5 years. He also is willing to take jobs in St. Paul as well.
Thanks, Daryl. We'll make sure that people can connect with you, and I think that's a good opportunity to again, work with your landlords as a renter. Other questions? So I'm going to go over here real quick.
I think you've kind of got up against this question before. What do you do, or does anyone have any experience with an alley where like one side of it is basically businesses and the other side is residential? We seem to have a conflict of who thinks they should maintain it or how much each should pay. One's like a big business, but they still use that alley a lot for how people get in and out of their service. So if you're up against Snelling, for example, for the Metro.
So the question is, how do you work with businesses? Yep. Well, I'm going to throw that up to our panelists.
I have just one part of my block. The 2 long sides are residentials, but I have businesses on the top side, which is on Payne Avenue. And I get about a 50% participation from those 2 businesses. And this year I pushed it much more to say this is a tax deductible expense for you. You can take this off on your tax bill. And so far I just gave out the letter a month ago. So, and they've always been 50%. Now I have a new owner manager, so I might get 100%. That would be great.
I've had good luck. I track them down. Sometimes they don't, the businesses, I have to work a little harder, I'll be honest. But then once I get them, well, they would. But sometimes they don't even, there's just, somebody sells and I have to find them. It takes a couple of years. And then I'll say, hey, it's been 3 years. Do you think you could make it up? So I've been very lucky. But I account for that in their price.
I think Heidi might have wanted to add something.
Yeah, I think some of it is persistence. And it's probably no different, too, with some of those neighbors who consistently ignore the request. It's just persistence. It's trying different ways to communicate with them. It's figuring out who, many cases in a business, maybe someone owns the business, but they're not actually working there on site. Are your letters or communications getting to them? So I think it's more effort, probably, when it's a business or, again, sometimes those landlord-tenant situations, but just keep at it. and keep working with them to talk about how, you want them to be part of the community, part of the neighborhood, and doing their part as well.
Thanks. And Carolyn would like to add working with businesses.
I live off a block of Snelling, and so share that alley with the Junior League, if you're familiar with that area. So they've been very good. And basically, there's a neighbor and I who have kind of split the block, and we've approached the businesses to be able to do it. And you go knocking on the door, and they've been very supportive. So actually, one of the other businesses contacts me now to say, hey, don't I owe you, and what's the bill? So they send a check in the mail. I'm able to deposit it. Like you, I'm responsible for the full payment up front and then go knocking on the doors during COVID. I did not do a very good job of reaching out to my neighbors, and I'm just going to pay it. And that's how it ended up for the alley captain before me. I've been doing it about 5 years or so. So yeah, they've been really great to do it. The property has been the tall apartment that's on that block and trying to find the landlord to participate. So I've just kind of given up on that piece, and everybody pays the same for us.
All right, I know we have another question up front, so I'm going to run. Oh, sorry, I'm going to grab this one in the back. I know you've had your hand up. Sorry about that.
Maybe you already discussed it or mentioned. How early are you sending out letters to neighbors? Like, how early in the season do you let them know, hey, it's time to start collecting?
This year, I started my letter, as I said, I was out in the middle of that ice and awfulness that was this horrible winter, snowmageddon that we had. And I started in August with my letter, but I actually started a little bit earlier because last year's letter, I did put a little blurb out on a little paragraph that said, hey, next year I'm going to be collecting before the bill happens. Because if I'm a little senior, and so if I need somebody to take over this job, I think the paying it up front is getting steeper and steeper. When I first took over this job, I think our total bill was $180. No big deal to your budget. But this is a budget breaker for most people. So, yep.
I usually start mid-September. Our contract begins the 1st of November. And I just have a calendar reminder every Saturday or Sunday morning. I go in and see where I'm at, and if I need to nudge people, that's when I do it.
Okay, I'm starting tomorrow. I thought I'd get those ideas. I've got my letter. I really encourage people to ask for their emails. I'm a polio survivor, so I really can't. I meet new people, but I can't be walking up and down. So I don't mail them. I want to get everyone's information. So again, communication, social, those things. So really encourage that.
Our contractor, they send out a letter at the beginning of September, so pretty much just right after the state fair, and then right away I draft up my letter and I distribute everything because the payment is due on the 1st of October. So if we can secure it right away, great. I don't have to worry about it, and then I can chase after the other apartments or homes that still need to pay. And I don't put out a second letter until a week after the first or whatever, just so people have some time and there's some leeway. There's no penalty fee or anything, but just having it secured for everyone else and any other contractors that need to come and use the alley or the police and fire department, we're all safe that way.
Mid-September for me too.
So what I'm hearing is it's not too late to start either. All right, you had a question.
So if you're going door to door, how do you identify yourself so that people don't dismiss you automatically? And then, mostly, how do you reach out to your neighbors and get buy-in?
So if you're starting there, we have a bunch of examples of letters that we all use. And I believe that they're going to be online.
Yes.
As well. So look at those. Use those as a way to communicate with your neighbors. When I've done the walking around piece, again, part of my letter includes requesting their contact information so that going forward I can email them. So I have the email addresses now for my entire alley. When you knock on their door and they don't answer, have your piece of paper there. If you can, try to personalize it, right? So using the alley or using the property tax lookup, you can personalize it and then just leave it for them. So that way then if they don't answer the door, if they're not home, they are still getting that information and hopefully they'll reach out to you. So that's what I have found works well when they're, again, having most of that information already, then it's just the new people. And it's if you can meet them, great. A lot of times, too, I will say, neighbors talk to each other. So a lot of times when someone new moves onto our alley, they will have already heard about that we have plowing or, the people that they're buying from. So it's word of mouth. And but having a piece of paper is really helpful for getting that information out.
I don't take any time to knock on the door. I don't ring a bell. I put it in an envelope. I put my address on there and their name, or I'll say, ahoy neighbor, something like that. And, just keep it casual and let them know that it's the responsibility of the abutting property owners to take care of the alleys and outline the reasons why. And then if they don't pay, I come back again and give me that money.
So you like rubber banding into the door handle?
Goodness, who has rubber bands? No. Just in the box.
Is that legal to put it in
No. No.
What?
Officially, no. You're not supposed to put it in the mailbox.
We're old. We're rule doers, but these young people, they just put it in. They're not going to be, nobody's going to jail for putting it in their thing. We need to listen to them. You're right. I understand. Oh my gosh.
One other note that I've done too is if you're down to like 5, I will send it to that email list to see if anybody else on the email list knows who lives in those homes or has a connection. It's a little bit of not shaming, but it's helpful to have other people pushing on the subject if they know somebody that you haven't met yet.
And in my letter, I actually do a recap of the monies that we've collected, just the amounts, no addresses or names or anything. But I also have, I did a thing I passed out a letter in August, but then I have a little follow-up that will come right before November 1st when the bill is due that says, we have this much still owing, you've contributed, and I'm just going to leave that blank for those that have, and for those that haven't rather, and for those that have, I'll write in that amount. And then I use blue painter's tape because then I'm not damaging anybody's property or using their mailbox.
Great. Thank you. All right, a question over here. All right, a question right here.
Hi, I've been at my property for 31 years. Hi?
Yep, go ahead.
I've been living at my property for 31 years and I've never heard of alley captains. So there are a lot of people out there like me, but also my question for you is, I've been doing alley captain for 3 years now, and sometimes we get complaints from our neighbors not on our block about our plowing, and I don't know how to handle that because we need help.
So is your question that you're plowing, you get questions from your neighbors and complaints about the alley plowing from other neighbors, so not necessarily the ones that are on the alley, but other neighbors? All right, that's a really great question. I'm sorry, I'm gonna take these one at a time because I know there's a lot of questions. So, do you guys get complaints from your neighbors about your alley plowing?
Sometimes I do, and I have to talk to the plow person from the persons from our alley. I haven't had a complaint from an alley person, a person living on the alley, I would bet it's 10, 15 years now. But people not on your alley, I would encourage them to contribute so we could get better quality plowing. I mean,
Okay, a follow-up question. What are they complaining about? What is their complaint about the plowing?
Well, we have a very tight alley, and sometimes the snow gets pushed out into the street and then across. And so, it's where do you put the snow when there's snow?
Can I take this one? From the city, again, do not push any snow from your driveway, your alley, your sidewalk into the street. It causes problems because that's when you're going to get complaints from your neighbors. And I will tell a quick story if it's okay. had a complaint from a resident that an alley was plowing their snow out into the middle of the street. Our plows come through on the main streets and pushed all that snow right into the end of their driveway. And it is a big mound of snow, and that's not something that somebody can move. So all the snow, whether it's you're doing it, the private plowing, it needs to go in the boulevards, and that's where it is. It's either on the private property where you get permission, either yours or somebody else's, otherwise it's in the boulevard. Do not put it in the street, and if you're getting complaints, that's also where, you know, we need to know about that too. Boulevard across, they can do that. They can do that. And they can, it's public right away. Just make sure you're not blocking their driveways and all that kind of stuff. But it is boulevard. All right. Sorry, I had a. No, oh yeah, you were actually next. Sorry.
Yeah, I do have a question, and it's about the contractor. I'm brand new to this. I just fell into it last week. And the reason why that happened, it fell to me, is because I have been the alley captain for our alley lights. I don't know if everybody else does that, but and that just gets billed to me through XL Energy. And then for the last 20 years, I've been going around collecting just for the light. Well, now our alley plower retired, and I get this call from everybody and says, well, you collect for the lights, why don't you collect for the plowing? So I've kind of fell into it. So I contacted other people in other blocks, found out a contractor. He came over, examined our alley, said, yes, I can do it. I'll get you on the list. It's $600 for the season. Now, I haven't contacted him directly yet. So this is kind of, I don't know. What's the form of the contract that you get from your contractor? Do you actually sign a contract with them for liability or whatever?
So this is for you as the panelist. So what is can you talk a little bit more about the contract and what you do and what you sign?
I guess I have to say that, no, I do not sign a contract. And I know you have a face about that. I just found out, in talking with Lisa, I found out that we should actually make sure that they're bonded and insured. And I don't know, I assume mine is, he comes to my house and collects the money, I pay the bill, and he plows my alley and does a good job. But I'm sure other people, do we have contracts that we sign? Okay.
I do. I get there's a signature line on my contract page that I sign. He doesn't send anything back. I wait and see just to make sure the check clears. And if the check clears, I figure we're good, and I've never had an issue, so.
I do have a contract. I don't.
How did you get it? What is it?
Well, he just sends it. The contractor, yeah, gives it to me. And so, again, I mean, it's just been such a friendly thing for like 15, maybe 20 years, you know. So I love his mother. I'm a grandma, so it's a different thing. But I still would want a contract, yes, because that wouldn't be good if he stopped.
We don't have a contract at all. I send in a check, and if the contractor continues doing excellent work, they'll get the business again next year. And if they don't, then there will be no more business, and we'll get someone new.
I do have an example of a contract from one of our plow folks too. So I'm going to leave that up there for people to see.
Previous years, I've had a contract, and one was very excellent plowing, and the other one who had the contract quit in January. So, you know, yes. So it's not a guarantee. No, it is not. But we're going to move on to our final question here for the panel. What advice or words of wisdom do you have for residents who are new alley captains or thinking about trying to organize their neighbors for alley plowing?
Oh, I'm the new one. Thanks for starting with me. Words of wisdom and advice. Well, be patient with yourself, first of all. Accept that, you're going to be learning this process and how it works and what works for you. And you're going to be learning new things all the time. I just learned that I'm not supposed to touch mailboxes. Oops. So, give yourself grace as well. And at the heart of it, we're all gathered to ensure our community is safe. We know our neighbors, and we just, it's kind of one day at a time kind of a thing, So be gentle with yourself. Check out those resources. And the city, I hope we do this again because this is super valuable. So congrats, all of you alley captains, for stepping up for your neighborhood. That's awesome.
Perfect.
Yes, and to quote Sean Kershaw, snow is social. The more you get to know your neighbors, the more you're out there smiling, waving at people. When I drive down my alley, I'm like, yes, I'm the snowplow captain. I snowplow for you. So the more you follow that dictum, that paradigm, snow is social. The alley belongs to everybody. All of those things. The more you're out there greeting and meeting people in a good way, you're going to get more participation, and it's going to make your job easier.
Angie, we see Department of Safety and Inspections. I've been in the back taking notes on the things that have been brought up here, and just inspired by all, one of these ancillary things that we're going to have a webpage that has all of the stuff you guys just talked about, having resources and what to look for in a contract, how to keep yourself organized, what to do with the overages, because there's so much of it. So one of those ancillary things, we've learned a lot from you, and we can, coordinate all this information to give the next alley captain some resources and not starting from scratch. So thank you all.
Thanks, Angie. And I know that there's more questions out in the audience right now, and I'm sorry we're not able to get to it. We could probably spend the whole afternoon talking about this topic. I wanted to share that, first of all, again, a huge, huge round of applause. Michelle, Deb, Kathy, Michael, and Heidi. And again, thank you so much.